population in a certain region has an annual growth rate of 5% per year. It is estimated the population in 2000 was 25,500. Find a function that models the population t after 2000. Use t equals 0 for 2000. So with this population growth, this is the equation that we want to use. The amount given a certain amount of time is equal to A, which is the initial amount, times 1 plus R, which is the rate written as a decimal, to the t power. So our rate, and it is growth, so it is a positive 5%. I have to write that as a decimal, so I'm going to have to move my decimal twice to the left. I'm sorry, yeah, to the left. Yeah, so it becomes R is actually going to be 0.05. And this A is the initial amount that when we started recording, how much was in there. And so they're saying if you let the first year, the beginning, be the year 2000, then in year 2000 there was 25,500 of this population. So that is our initial value that we can plug in. So we just plug in our initial and rate here, and then we get our answer, the equation we were looking for. So substituting in for A, the 25500, substituting in for R, it's 0.05, and the t just stays the same. I can simplify here by adding the 1 plus the 0.05. And so my final answer here is 2. Is this. There we go. All right, for part B, it says estimate the population in year 2008. Well, what would t be if t is the number of years after year 2000? So 2008 would be t equals 8. So this function that we just got done writing, when we plug in a certain year, it will give us the population at that year. So use the function from part A to estimate the population in year 2008. All we have to do is plug in 8 into our function from above. So 25,500, 1.05 to the 8th. And that will give us the population in year 8, which is what this notation means. Population at year 8. So we can use our calculator to calculate this. I'm going to show you how to do it. So we put 255, I guess I have to put here, 25500. And actually, to be honest, I think this is going to work fine. I'm just going to try to do this, but honestly, I wouldn't do it this way typically. How I'm going to do this, but I'm going to see if it works. 1.05, and then I'm going to raise it to the power. So I'm going to use that little caret. It's above the division symbol, to the power of 8. So again, how did I get an exponent of 8? I used a little upside down V looking button that's right above the division button on my calculator. And this is a calculator that's very similar to the TI-84 calculator. And I'm going to press enter. And I get this 37,675. And they want our answer to be an integer number because you can't have like part of a fox. So we just round our answer here. And since, and that's the end. So there's 37,675 boxes in 8 years from then. Thanks for watching.